Bueno, y ya estamos de regreso. Ahora tendremos una conferencia magistral llamada Modelos Alternativos para Construir Redes con Blockchain. Débora Simpier nos presentará un novedoso modelo de negocio para construir redes de telecomunicaciones especialmente útil para zonas rurales, tanto a través de redes de fibra óptica como en redes inalámbricas. Como comentado, el ponente esta vez es Débora Simpier, CEO and co-founder de Althea, y tendremos la participación activa, de nuevo, de Pepe, CEO y fundador de Todo Fibra Óptica. Adelante, chicos.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm very excited to be part of this important conference and share with you a little bit more about our model and some different ways of maybe looking at how the internet is built now and some solutions to how we can build it better in the future. I'd like to share with you a slide deck. So one moment here and I'll bring that up. All right, everybody seen that all right?
Yes, there you go. Perfect.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thanks so much. So as they mentioned, my name is Sabra. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Althea that we've been building now for about 5 years. And we have networks in 8 different states in the US and using this platform and in Africa. And we've worked in Puerto Rico and in Colombia as well too. So what is Althea? So Althea is kind of the fundamental thesis that what's broken about the internet today, why we haven't been able to provide more internet for more people at a price that they can afford, is not that companies are evil or there's issues in the way it's being delivered, but that the systems are kind of fundamentally broken. They're inefficient to build because of their monopolistic and siloed nature. They're also very brittle. And Althea is the thesis that we can bring the open markets for bandwidth and the access that we see at the core of the internet, that internet exchange where carriers charge each other, was kind of a beautiful representation of how an open market can actually increase bandwidth, capacity, and lower costs. Now, Althea is the thesis that we can bring that open market and access all the way down to the user device. And how we do this is by changing the systems, providing a platform for that open access market, an idea of sort of having broadband Legos. Not every community is the same, right? There's this bespoke and different differences. And so it's important that the way we build networks is bespoke and specific to the communities. And it's also about flexible payments. I think one of the things that's been really glaringly obvious in this sort of last couple of years as we've looked at the digital divide is that payments and access is a big part of that. For example, in the US, and 29% of New York City doesn't have access to the internet. And that's not because of infrastructure, cables and wires and things like that. It's because the payment structures don't allow for people to be able to kind of come in, pay as they go, or pay in an affordable way. And then the other sort of main core of what we're looking at here is being able to build networks that are open access, that have no dead ends. Right now we think about building a fiber optic cable to one home, and it's very capital inefficient because that one home is the end point. There's no way that network can grow beyond that. So a lot of how we look at Althea and a lot of how we look at platforms and solutions is about saying, okay, what if that was open access? What if we could take that connection and share it further? It could grow beyond that one household or business. So this is a bit of a confusing slide, so bear with me here. But what you're seeing here is the current state of the internet. And I think maybe that's a bit telling that it's pretty confusing. And when we think about how the structure of the internet is, you have your kind of core, the internet exchange, where where all kind of internet comes in and peers. Then you have a middle mile, and then there is a last mile connectivity. And all along that is routers and negotiations and contracts. And it's each of these individual contract negotiations that take a long time, that are full of friction and add extra cost, that really degrade the system as we know it now. And Althea, we offer, and this is one way to look at it, but the main thing that we look at here is like, we can take and programmatically make these negotiations. So the user can choose kind of their choice of cost and latency. And you can have smart contracts actually negotiate each of those last mile, middle mile, and core of the internet. The other neat thing that smart contracts lets us do is have payment on a minute-by-minute basis for a microtransaction, 10 cents, 15 cents, 20 cents for smaller increments, rather than the latency, payment latency of an invoice with net 30 that maybe doesn't ever get paid or never gets negotiated. So it eliminates all of that friction of time and also all of that friction and latency of payment, which is also risk for carriers. It's a lot of risk for carriers to come in, expect that they're going to get paid on net 30. Whereas with this, we can set smart contracts and the entities don't have to trust each other. So this just kind of goes through a little bit of all the kind of broadband Legos that we can bring to a network to make all of this sort of work, to make that open access network work. Things like the payment platform for microtransactions, coordinating infrastructure builds, decoupling the service layer so someone can service a network while having a different entity own the infrastructure, which also creates different types of investment models that can happen as well. Flexible billing options. And then finally, what becomes very interesting also is that because we're negotiating microtransactions between devices that have wallets in them, this also means that you can have this between a vehicle or IoT or smart ag or anything you can kind of think of here. And that really creates new ways to think about how we grow networks, especially in rural places where it can be difficult to justify the cost of capital expenditure. So a farmer then can put up a LTE network within their farm, providing access to the tractors, the combines, the sensors in the field, while also using that same infrastructure to grow that network to his neighboring farms. And that's the kind of capital efficiency we can get. So one of the other kind of core things that we think is very interesting about this programmatic coordination is that instead of the corporation or company setting the prices, users can basically set their price, their choice of cost and latency at the device, and then the network can actually roam in a software-defined way and then pay those upstream automatically. So it's a radically sort of different way of thinking about how payments are routed. So here's kind of a quick little way this works. So the router itself, in this case a router, but it could be your phone or a device, is actually constantly looking at all of the different connections back to the internet and their cost, and then choosing one based on your choice, which I think is a really exciting way. And that's really how we get to that open market that we're looking for here. So that routing, what we call software-defined routing, or another way to think about it is a distance vector mesh, means that instead of having static routes that are really brittle, one piece of fiber goes down or one antenna goes down, it's constantly looking for ways to self-heal that network. And this is also really important in rural areas with challenging weather. Maybe you're in a hurricane-prone area where oftentimes wind is going to damage part of that network. You could build lots of redundant routes, but again, there's that capital inefficiency. So this is why having a software-defined routing network instead of a statically routing one is really important to how we think about building a better system. And then the other thing that we think is really important is democratizing access to LTE networks. So where people experience the internet isn't actually at their router, it's at their devices. And we think about in the, ubiquitously connected world, we'll have, your car, your device, the charging station, the street lights, the municipal infrastructure. On your farm, you're going to have that smart and connected farm. And these are all connected with like a SIM basically to connect into the network. And before, probably about a year or so ago, SIM-based networks were really only in the purview of large monopolistic telecoms because of cost and complexity to deploy. So a variety of different technological innovations have changed that. So now we can start thinking about cost-effective LTE deployments that anyone can build. The farmer in that previous example can build their own LTE network almost as easily as they could put in a Wi-Fi mesh. And one of the things that we felt was so important is making that cost effective. So what the Althea platform also has in its sort of stack of Legos is an embedded EPC right into that home router. So again, that home router isn't a dead end. It can grow into an LTE type of network that then sort of roams and interacts in a larger public one. And it's important that that's also scalable. So just real quick on this slide, basically what we're looking at is you can have that farm-based EPC, which is that local LTE connectivity, or that can grow and scale, stack into each other, and then roam back to that data center where we're bringing back in that price-aware routing, that dynamic routing, and failover. And this is the fun one. So this is the fun one, right? What can we've talked about why smart contracts are important, that programmatic part of it. But the other kind of piece of this is also that microtransactional revenue, that getting paid minute by minute, that having a wallet enables, but also things very similar to what we think about with like M-Pesa, right? Access to payments that can be used at a variety of places. Also, lending, you could do micro lending, a lot of financing that can really support and grow local economies by empowering people to have the revenue that they need to grow their business. If you think, about these kinds of networks actually empower a local store owner who could put up some infrastructure and provide Wi-Fi to their neighbors and earn enough revenue. And then with this sort of coming into their own wallet, it really gives a very flexible and composable way to have access to financing as well. And I think that's a really empowering thought. One more kind of point on that, the financing as well, is that or kind of that blockchain wallet under the hood is in the future. I think that the world itself will not, pull out a debit card or, invoice someone for payments, but payments will occur as a result of people moving through space and time, going through a toll road or, harvesting crops or, buying something from a store, can all be programmatic. And this is kind of the idea of what it all looks like together. These networks can stackable and composable, and you can sort of build them to the needs of that network, and they can grow organically. This slide talks a little bit about how that growth actually can look a bit like a revenue share, because all of those contracts are programmatic. Different entities can sort of get paid on kind of a revenue share basis. The person who owns the tower, the farmer, and then a service layer provider. And some of the nifty things that we have to make this all work together, manage routers. And I want to leave some time to have questions, and thank you so much for listening to the presentation.
Thank you so much, Deborah. This is fantastic. And if you could stop sharing your presentation, that'd be great. So you and I can be there on camera. Let me give I'm going to do my best to give a 1-minute summary in Spanish of everything you said, which is En pocas palabras, la verdad esto es un tema muy fascinante, me interesa mucho. Débora nos hizo el favor de mostrarnos un modelo completamente alternativo de negocio que parece que está funcionando muy bien, sobre todo para zonas rurales. Me viene a la mente y ahorita le voy a preguntar en inglés y ya luego tendremos el chance de traducirlo con subtítulos al español. Pero en pocas palabras, este modelo de blockchain, imagínense que es un juego de Legos donde habla de plug and play, que básicamente son como Legos, vas conectando diferentes componentes. En Argentina me viene a la mente, y ahí Raúl al rato espero que lo tengamos en línea al final del día una charla, porque creo que el modelo que usan en Argentina de las cooperativas, donde en una comunidad fuera de la ciudad rural se unen diferentes empresarios, como el dueño de la funeraria, el dueño del supermercado, el dueño de la tintorería, y entre ellos ponen el capital para llevar a cabo, construir una red y llevar internet a sus comunidades donde tradicionalmente no llegan los operadores típicos. El modelo de Débora se me hace muy fascinante porque también, por ejemplo, estamos acostumbrados a pagar por un servicio fijo de tal velocidad de 200, 500 megas y con tal latencia que es básicamente el tiempo de respuesta del Internet, ¿no? Que para algunas personas como los gamers, la latencia es de suma importancia porque los traders, los que están negociando en el mundo de las finanzas en línea, el tiempo de respuesta literalmente pueden perder mucho dinero en segundos. Entonces tiene que tener una respuesta inmediata. Pero a lo mejor hay gente que simplemente necesita internet para ver Netflix y ahí no requiere de una respuesta tan inmediata. Entonces este modelo permite, flexibiliza casi. Todos sabemos, por ejemplo, tú recibes un contrato de un operador y es no sé, 20 hojas de texto chiquito, de letra chiquita, y tú no puedes negociarlo. Y este modelo permite empoderar a la gente a que pueda negociar qué condiciones quiere. Yo requiero de una latencia como gamer muy rápida. eh, Varios pueden ser los dueños de esto. Digamos que tú pones una antena en tu casa. Tú también eres parte de esta cadena de valor de blockchain, tal cual. Hay un tema muy importante ahí de Software Defined Networks, donde la red ve según tu requerimiento. Si eres un médico que está operando remotamente, obviamente que le va a dar prioridad a tu tráfico, te va a mandar por la ruta más rápida, más fácil. Si estás viendo una película, pues no digo malo que se te congele la pantalla, pero no es la prioridad que tiene como quien está operando remotamente, que es una realidad hoy en día. Los autos autónomos también, que tienen que tener una respuesta inmediata. Así que eh, mucho tema para hablar después de esto, pero going back to you, Deb, I try my best, and I really don't know if I did it the right way, but I try my best at summarizing, like the rough idea. Uh, there's so many components and so many ideas that you presented that I think we can do a one-day workshop on this alone. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much. And if I understand correctly, this modular process like Lego, I was giving them in Spanish the analogy. In Argentina, they have this model that is called cooperativas, like cooperatives, and basically, you have the local business owners in a community that is not being attended, being served, and you have the funeral home owner, you have the grocery store owner, you have the liquor store owner, and they all pull together their money to create a co-op. And basically, in a sense, if I understand correctly, your business model allows multiple participants to be part of the company, especially in rural areas, underserved.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. So not only pool their money, but also resources. So many, that funeral home could host that antenna, or that infrastructure, and then get paid part of that back, that revenue share back automatically. So it takes the social coordination of a cooperative and makes it programmatic. So it's easier to set up these kinds of coordination. It also, it can also be used to have investment into the infrastructure cooperatively or separate than the local kind of governance or service layer that's maintaining the network.
Perfect. And let me, this is in Spanglish. So, en pocas palabras, sí me confirma que muy similar al como se hace en Argentina con estas cooperativas, que múltiples entes participan como dueños de la red, sobre todo en zonas de difícil acceso. Es muy similar, excepto que aquí se hace uso de esta otra tecnología de blockchain para que gente que ni siquiera se conoce, como las criptomonedas, te permite hacer transacciones seguras, te permite confiar en la tecnología más que en la gente. From there, open access. By open access, do you mean that any operator could offer their own service? Like you're not the one offering the actual service?
Yeah. So the way that we kind of look at open access is you have an infrastructure layer that's decoupled from the service layer, and then that same internet architecture could serve like a Claro or a local network or something else, right? So any kind of operator can come along and utilize that same core infrastructure.
Great. And on flexible payments, that's something that I really, perdón, les digo en español, le preguntaba yo si el acceso abierto era como una red neutral, y me confirma que sí, que básicamente es infraestructura. You're basically an infrastructure company, right? You're not a service provider per se.
Yeah, no, what we do is the protocol, so software company maybe. but we do also help, we do have a company that supports people utilizing the platform and helps them understand how to use it and provide support. So there is that other piece of what we do too.
Would one of your customers be neutral operators?
Yeah, absolutely. We have so we have essentially kind of a whole tool set for operators to be able to use the protocol, and a variety of different partner programs to help.
Ok, básicamente le estoy preguntando si él es una empresa que ofrece servicios a operadores neutrales, y sí, básicamente es más que de infraestructura. Althea es una empresa de software, que los protocolos que tienen para poder canalizar todo el tráfico, el cobro, etcétera. Así que muy interesante. Choice of latency. What I said in Spanish was basically, if you're a gamer, obviously, or a trader, in latency is quite important. And typical contracts with a service provider, you have a one set of, like rules, and there's no choice. In this case, from what I understood, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you can actually decide what sort of speed and latency you need. If I'm just going to be watching Netflix, it's not the same as if I'm going to be trading or gaming, where the time of response could mean money lost on the table.
Yes, and the exciting thing is, because it's all software defined, we can do that on a minute by minute basis. So maybe, you're watching Netflix and you don't care and you want to pay less, and then switch it over to paying more. So I think, in the future, latency will really be the metric. We talk about bandwidth now, we talk about throughput, but and we might be a little ahead of our time, but in the future it will be latency.
Le preguntaba yo de si estaba yo correcto en lo que traté de explicar yo en español hace rato, de la latencia, que la flexibilidad de que uno elija dependiendo de las funciones, y me confirma que tal cual. Si tú eres un gamer, un trader, obviamente quieres tener una respuesta inmediata de la red para que no pierdas dinero o tu juego, ¿no? Y me confirma tal cual. Moving on to multi-entity networks. That's basically the same thing as the co-ops that we were talking about, I think, right?
It's a fancy way of saying co-op, but it means more than one person can own different pieces of it. And I think the difference between a co-op with social coordination and the Althea protocol is the trustless nature of it. So that removes the risk. So right now there could be risk of, social coordination problems or payment issues, or in countries where, the legal system is maybe not as quick to respond. There's a lot of risk, but this removes all of that. So everything is sort of transparent. All of those, payments are programmatic. You're getting paid minute by minute. So if it's not going the way you like it, you're having you're not having a large debt accrued.
That's great. And that brings me to, there's too many questions I have, but software-defined networks. Me estoy preguntando de un término que se usa mucho en esta plataforma, que es basado en el software, cómo el software agiliza las transacciones y el tráfico de datos. Tell us a little bit more about, like exactly what is a software-defined network.
It's really the difference between static and dynamic. Meaning you're setting a set of parameters, in this case, the user setting the parameters, and the network will route and, have contracts associated with that. So that's why we can build a core that will scale. Then that's how we can, build resilient networks. So it's going to always look for a way out based on these certain parameters. And we can do that with software rather than the brittleness right now where we have prescribed set routes.
Fantastic. Y bueno, básicamente sí, tal cual el software defined networks es la flexibilidad que te da en automático. La plataforma hace uso de la mejor ruta, digamos que tienes, si vas a ir a esta comunicación de aquí a Perú, tienes 3, 5, 6 diferentes vías de diferentes datos, centros de datos, y cómo llegas a más rápido dependiendo de los requerimientos de tu conexión. Si requieres una latencia de una respuesta inmediata, como un gamer, volviendo al tema, entonces encuentras la ruta más rápida por el precio que tú quieres pagar para ofrecerte el servicio. Going to the revenue sharing tokens, as I understood, basically, say I put an Althea antenna on my home, on the rooftop. Do I get some tokens for putting the antenna?
The key thing to remember here is that these are unstable. The platform is meant to work with stable coins, right? So, or digital representations of a dollar or a stable sovereign currency. So that it really is a revenue share. So if you're getting $1 in, 10 cents will go to you, who are hosting that radio. But it's not meant to give a speculative incentive. It's meant to share that real revenue coming in. So it's unstable. It's denominated in, although it's flexible and agnostic to the stable currency. In the U.S. we use a stable version of the dollar.
Who does that? Who decides? Based on what component of the network you own?
The network. The service layer will. So whoever sort of operating and maintaining the network, those routers or that, so if it was Claro, they would decide what currency they're using in a given area.
Okay. En pocas palabras, yo le pregunté, la verdad no me queda muy claro todavía, el tema de cómo se hace el compartir los ingresos, revenue sharing en inglés. En pocas palabras, todo es con tipo tokens, criptomoneda, que ahí te da la certeza, te da créditos a futuro. Tell us a little bit about what you have done in Puerto Rico and in Colombia. And actually, yeah, Jerry.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, tell us a little bit about, I know you have a project in Puerto Rico and Colombia, I believe, right? You have done pilots over there.
Yeah, so the project in Puerto Rico, I think, is particularly interesting. We have a partnership with Hub Advanced Networks, who has a large fiber network across the island. And what we're doing there is we run an Althea instance at the core of their network, at the internet exchange. And so people can connect, so smaller operators can connect to that network with by basically opening a port, and then they're paying 2 or 3 cents a gigabyte for that infrastructure. And, instead of kind of these long contracts, again, like we we're saying earlier about how everything is sort of segmented in paper contracts, we basically are creating a smart contract with the with that middle mile provider. Sorry for the large dog.
Basically. That's great. Thank you. We can't hear it, and that's great. What's his name?
This is Barnaby. It's Barnaby. He's a mastiff lab.
She's awesome.
Now he's internet famous.
Yeah. I think everybody loves dogs. I have people, everybody in our team, I think, has dogs. So that's great. Nice. Hurricane prone. You mentioned something about hurricane prone areas. How does this technology apply to such?
Yeah, no. So when we were kind of talking about the brittleness of the current infrastructure, those bespoke routes, those contracts that make it very hard for smaller operators, what we're looking at with the software-defined network is a network that's going to be constantly looking for a way to self-heal. So part of that network goes down, the network's going to keep back up. That makes repair a lot easier. It also, because you're saying the other kind of piece here is because there's kind of multiple homeowners that are participating in that, it's a lot more cost effective to have redundant routes.
Perfect. Then one thing that I really I don't understand, so I'm asking you to explain in, like palitos y bolitas, we say in Spanish, like little zeros and ones. The blockchain wallet, how does that work?
So it's a bit like an account that you might have, like, for example, with M-Pesa, right? So it's an account, you own the keys to it. So it's on your ownership. It's not an account that lives at a bank. And it lives in your device. And as long as you kind of have the what they call the private keys, as long as you have that account for that, you can access it. But it's something that you can receive kind of multiple tokens to. You can send automatically, just the way you would like with the normal account that's custodied somewhere else. The main sort of difference here is this is an account that you have the access to because you own the private keys.
Perfect. And going back to the plug and play, and this is more going to the technology. By plug and play, do you mean also the use in the, I know you're a software company, but do you also mean the use of pre-connectorized solutions whenever they're building the network?
I'm sorry, say that again. The use of what?
Pre-connectorized solutions, which are plug and play, where you have like cables that have been pre-connected, and you have these boxes where you just basically kind of like a Lego. That's why I thought about it.
That is what we mean by
plug
that.
And play.
Yeah, so basically there's no manual configuration. Essentially, when you put the firmware on a device, you can plug in the ports and switch there's a little toggle in the interface. I want this port to do Wi-Fi. I want this port to do, LAN connectivity. And so that's exactly right. You just sort of take the software or a pre-configured device, plug it in, plug cables into it, and go.
Perfect. And I know that you're not a construction company as such, but how do you see the impact of in the US you have all these big subsidies, and yet there are not enough, and Jerry Morla will give us a follow-up presentation in the next session on fiber, demystifying fiber, by the way. I think you will enjoy it. as well. How do you, last night talking with Johan from Canadian Fiber Optics, who builds rural networks. And one of the big challenges he has, they have in Canada, in the US, in Latin America, is finding qualified technicians, installers to build these networks. What is your perspective? What is your experience in regards to this and how to solve it?
Yeah, I think that is, I don't think we can, diminish that as being a challenge. However, what we are seeing is that it is, becoming more democratized. I just bought a fiber splicer. It was something like, $6,000. So not untenable for someone to do. There's a lot of pre-terminated fiber cables now. So certainly the longer runs, the larger infrastructure projects are still within that kind of purview of skilled technicians. But much of the work is actually becoming democratized, where it's just as simple as laying any kind of cable through a conduit. So if you have someone that can do that, and the cost of equipment is also going down. So I think I think we're making it easier and easier to deploy.
Genial. Le preguntaba, thank you. Le preguntaba a Débora básicamente que cómo está lidiando con cómo lidian, cuál es su perspectiva del tema de conseguir técnicos evidentemente capacitados, pero creo que también hasta la parte de instalación con estos sistemas que no hablamos en esta semana de ello, pero es tema para otro taller, de las soluciones preconectorizadas, permiten que ya no sea tan especializado el tener que hacer empalmes, fusiones, sino que todo es mucho más fácil, como si fuera un Lego nuevamente. And from there, let me take you to how do you, we talk about this when we met in Mexico City, what was it, 2 months ago by now? And I know that you do a lot of work, outreach with indigenous communities. And Johan was telling us just before how he was actually, there is a movement in Canada with these local communities that they want to build their own network, their own data centers to store their historical data, like to preserve, what they know. And they want to have it locally because they want to make sure that, it's not in some other server far away and God forbid something happen, it gets lost. What is your experience in these communities doing the outreach, and what's the impact in talking directly to these communities and helping them empowering them, to connect to the digital economy?
It's such an important part of our work that we do. And I think whether it's an indigenous community or a local farming community, what we're talking about is sovereignty and ownership. Because really, ownership comes down to two things: choice and leverage. And those are things that everyone should have. And I think certainly in case of indigenous communities where they're really sovereign nations, that sovereignty is so important. And this is why we have really been working on the capacity piece of it. So that this includes sort of the Legos, but it also includes a lot of education so that leadership can make the correct choices for their tribe and have that understanding and have that choice. And so a lot of what we've done is building the Tribal Resource Center, which was about capacity education.
Fantastic. And the feedback that you get from these communities, after you connect them, tell us, I'm sure you have stories of how people react once they have, when you don't know it, when you haven't tasted it, like high-speed broadband, you don't really know the difference. But once they have a taste, what's the feedback that you have received regarding that?
One of the interesting surprises that you might not think about was how it affects family time. So many people were having to use the internet at public places like a library or, driving to a Wi-Fi center or something like that. so if the young, you have a teenager, 16, 17, 18, leaving the home to go to the school or to the library, that meant for many of these hardworking families who were maybe even working 2 jobs, they spent no time together. So one of the surprising impacts that I've seen across rural places, urban communities, whatever, is the impact is actually, it brings people together. People are able to spend more time together because the internet's there at their device and at their home.
That's great. Last night when I was talking with Johan from Canada, he was telling me stories about how during the pandemic, you would see people, students going to McDonald's,
Yeah,
and connecting through the Wi-Fi of McDonald's to be able to, and you guys live in the first world countries. Imagine how, the situation in Latin America, in the Caribbean, the impact, the digital divide, how it impacted the people who didn't have. I have a cousin who is a teacher, and she works in a marginated community, and she was she was devastated because they had a study plan, but literally the students, they would have to borrow the internet from their parents' cell phone, and they would have to put like $2.50 of credit, and that wasn't enough to allow them to watch all the content that they needed to do. But I think we're coming close to an end. I would like you to give us a final thought about, what do you want to leave for the audience? What one final, first in Spanish, déjenme decirles, yo le hablaba ahorita a Débora, perdón, se me olvida, estamos en Spanglish, se me olvida que estábamos hablando en español también. Y lo que platicábamos ahorita es del impacto que tiene en las comunidades indígenas. Su empresa hace una labor muy fuerte de llegar a concientizar a las comunidades rurales nativas o indígenas, en nuestro caso, de lo que significa todo esto, sobre todo a sus líderes, para que entiendan el impacto y faciliten el despliegue de estas redes. Y hace cosas como, correct me if I'm wrong, but you bring a splicer to these indigenous communities, and you have done that?
yes. Yeah.
And show them and let them splice.
Yeah, it's very fun. If you haven't done it before, I highly recommend it.
Entonces, literalmente lleva un splicer a estas comunidades y les muestra a la gente local hasta cómo fusionar una fibra, y es un proceso hoy en día con los equipos modernos mucho más fácil. Ahí luego les comparto un artículo que hicimos hace poco con el equipo de AFL sobre la evolución de estos equipos, que literalmente si tienes 2 fibras y tienes un núcleo, 2 fibras, 2 hilos de pelo del grosor de un cabello, y el núcleo es una fracción de ese grosor, tienes que alinear perfectamente ese núcleo para que la luz, los pulsos de luz que llevan toda esta información digital alrededor del planeta puedan llegar al otro lado, ¿no? Y ella lo que hace es, su equipo llevan estas fusionadoras, empalmadoras a las comunidades y dejan que la gente toque, que la gente fusione, y decía que es muy divertido hacer esto. And so, yeah, now one other idea or question, actually, and would this model, would this also be something viable for like suburban, for urban areas?
Yeah. In fact, we're working together with a nonprofit who's building in Atlanta and Dallas with the goal of 15,000 connected homes. And this is a mix of, bringing new infrastructure to apartments, doing LTE, different types of technology. So absolutely.
That's great. And how many people do you have in your company?
So we're about 20 right now, and growing.
Le pregunté primero de si este modelo funcionaría también en una zona suburbana o una zona urbana, y dice que definitivamente están ahí haciendo una construcción muy importante en Atlanta. Y poquito de su equipo, de cuánta gente tiene, 20, 40.
20.
40, 20, 20. Yeah. And your headquarters is based where?
We are actually based in a rural community in Oregon where we got our start. So you can run, that's what the internet does. You can run big blockchain technological companies right from where you're at.
Fantastic. Básicamente, ahí está su perro. No, you can leave your mic on. Doesn't matter. This is the digital, virtual world.
We have an internet famous dog now. So
One of our colleagues, Thelma, I think she's there, Thelma Reese, or financial manager. She loves dogs and she works as a volunteer at a shelter that they rescue dogs in Florida, South Florida. And funny story, we were in a call at our old job and there were 5 of us, I think. And Terry was there, but his head was looking down. He was reading something. So it looked like he was sleeping. And Thelma's dogs started snoring. And they snore really loud. And I really thought the first time that it was actually my colleague who was actually the one snoring, but no, it was Thelma's dog. So wrapping up, I want to, les contaba de que esto de los perros hoy en día, quienes trabajamos gracias a la pandemia virtualmente, creo que nos ha humanizado más. Sabemos que todos tenemos perros, niños, gatos, lo que sea en casa y hay situaciones que salen fuera de control y no tenemos que ser perfectos, todo podemos mostrarnos como somos, por eso les pedimos que vinieran casuales, come as you are, dice la canción. Y bueno, ya vamos a cerrar, pero hablábamos de los perros, de los perros de Thelma que roncan muy fuerte y de repente se escuchan cuando estamos en llamadas, ahí se oye, porque ahorita Débora estaba preocupada de que su perro estaba ladrando. Débora, one final thought for our audience that you want to leave them with. And thank you so much for your time. I know you're a really busy woman.
Yeah, no, thank you so much and again, honored to be here and be part of this really important conference. My final thought that I'd like to leave us with is the core idea that the internet is based on a system, and the systems that we build in turn shape who we are as societies and communities. So it's important that we build networks with purpose and design that solve the goal of empowering community as the design goal. So the systems we build us.
Fantastic. I really appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you again and here in Mexico City, or maybe I'll come to Oregon next time.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you.
Gracias. Andre. Y bueno, pues terminamos con...
Sí, ya estoy.
Ya estás.
Sí, de hecho, eso de los perros me llama mucho la atención porque en una de las reuniones que teníamos con Thelma, comencé a escuchar esos ronquidos y pensé que Thelma se había quedado dormida porque tenía la pantalla apagada. Bueno, esos son los gajes del oficio hoy en día. Algo que me llamó mucho la atención es que ya Débora tiene 12 años en esto. Débora inició su batalla por la neutralidad de la red y libertad de Internet alrededor del 2010 y ha estado trabajando en eso desde una perspectiva bastante legislativa. Se enfocó en cómo los sistemas descentralizados podrían hacer esto posible para que las personas pudieran elegir de forma programática en lugar de presionar a los legisladores. Y bueno, como vieron, Althea es una plataforma para redes distribuidas para construir soluciones de conectividad y banda ancha que sean modulares, es decir, construir redes con acceso abierto y que no se vuelvan una calle sin salida. Y bueno, regresando a las comunidades indígenas, Johan también lo comentó, Débora también trabaja con ellos. Estas comunidades tienen mucho sentimiento de propiedad y soberanía, de elección y apalancamiento, y a través de la plataforma de Althea logran explicarles el gran impacto que esto tiene y educarlos para cumplir con los requisitos para lograr esa conectividad. Y bueno, al final me llamó mucho la atención, no sabía que Althea tenía una moneda y una billetera propia de cripto, y al final, bueno, en ese sentido, y ella lo mencionó, si el proceso de transacciones tiene una latencia alta, es un verdadero problema para el trader, o sea, para quien vaya a comprar o vender sus criptomonedas a dinero fiat o a dinero normal. Débora, realmente me encanta ese tópico, así que tal vez en algún momento podamos sentarnos vos y yo a platicarlo. Y bueno, casi ya vamos a nuestra siguiente actividad. Regresamos en un instante.